Welcome back. In the previous video, I showed you how to use Piocaro to research and compare funds in line with your investment goals and priorities. In this video, we'll select one fund, an ETF, to look at in detail. We'll also select funds that interest us and store them provisionally in a shopping cart. These selections can then be used to build a portfolio, and that'll be the subject of the next video. Okay, for this example, I'm going to select the iShares S&P 500 Growth ETF. Here we have the realm of the iShares S&P 500 Growth ETF. From the profile, we know the fund family, the iShares fund. The fund was started almost 18 years ago, and it seeks to track the S&P 500 Growth Index. Here's the fund's price quote. This is a 15-minute delay quote. And here's the fund's returns over the past 10 years, as well as the year-to-date return. Looks like this ETF's doing very well. Let's have a look at its fees. It has a 0.18% expense ratio. Compared to its peers, it's not the lowest expense ratio, but it's still below the group average. So in terms of expense ratio, it isn't expensive. In the same way, we can analyse the ETF's distribution yield, or trailing 12 months yield, total assets under management, and its turnover. Next, let's look at the risk-adjusted performance. You might be familiar with John Bogle, founder of the Vanguard Group, and his concept of the eternal triangle of investing: risk, return, and cost or fee. Piocaro consolidates these three measures into an efficiency score to make it easier for you to compare funds. The polar chart shows the relationships across the three sides of this triangle, with an added axis for the efficiency score for various trailing periods. It also shows how an ETF compares to its peer group average and the average of the top performers within the group. Looking at the colours, the blue area is the ETF. The green area is the top performer average. And the orange is the peer average. In general, you want to look for a skinny blue diamond shape. This indicates a high return, low risk, and low fees, which translates to a high efficiency score. On the right side, next to the polar chart, there's the overall rating. This is based on a weighted average across the different trailing periods, but with a heavier weight for the most recent period. The overall fee and downside volatility for this ETF are below the averages of its peer group, and it has the highest returns and efficiency score. The downside risk analysis section shows the overall downside risk of this ETF is below its peer average. Looks promising. Let's look at this chart that shows how your hypothetical $10,000 investment has performed in the past 5 years and how it compares to the S&P 500 Growth Index and the Russell 1000 Growth Index. It's tracking very closely to the US large growth indices. The year-over-year returns summarizes the ETF's returns, dividends, and dividend yield for each year for the past 10 years. The portfolio holdings summarize this ETF's overall holdings. So what does all this data tell me? Well, it's tracking very closely to the S&P 500 Growth Index, so it's meeting its stated objective. It also tells me the expense ratio is below its peer average, even though it's not the lowest. Similarly, based on the 1, 3, 5, and 10 years volatility, its overall downside volatility is below its peer group average. Lastly, it tells me the ETF has relatively high Sharpe and Sortino ratios, Year over year, it has good dividends or distribution yields. So, let's assume I'm interested in this fund. How can I pull together the funds that I'm interested in? Piocaro uses the familiar shopping cart model so you can easily store the funds that interest you. You needn't buy them all, it's just a repository from which you can make your final choices. You can also use the Funds Screener to screen ETFs that interest you and select multiple funds simultaneously to add to your cart. Now to refining those choices. Your cart now has a set of possibilities in it. From here, we can build and optimize a portfolio of funds. In the next video, I'll show you how to do exactly that. See you then.